It goes without saying that improving your green reading and your ability to predict where the ball's going to break, by how much, and the speed you need to roll it out to match that break will be one of the biggest ways you can improve your putting. And it's an area that lots of players will come in and ask me for help with. And when I have a discussion with them and start to explore what they're doing when they're on the course at the moment and what their process of green reading is, the common consensus generally is it's a little bit vague. Players kind of come in with lots of different concepts and lots of different ideas, but no real set process and structure to go through to give themselves the best opportunity of actually reading a putt better, and then give themselves some ability to start it online and get the speed right. And it's tricky when you're out playing on the course, isn't it? That you hit a putt and it can be hard to tell, like, did I pull that or push that slightly? How was my speed? Was it my read? If you're going to apportion the blame to a certain putt missing, it can be sometimes hard to work out which one of those factors it was that was the number one culprit. So this tip today is going to be about exploring green reading and some things you can go onto a green, to do to actually help you explore how to become a better green reader. So it's probably worthwhile starting off with just talking about some of the things you need to be aware of when you're looking at a putt when it comes to then reading a green. Now, when you actually go to hit putts on the golf course, you don't need to be thinking about all of these factors, but as we maybe talk through this exercise as we go on, you can start to maybe work out which ones are more important for you. And then therefore they're the ones you can kind of gravitate back towards when you're on the golf course. So we've got a ball set here on a putt that's 10 feet. Now it's ever so slightly right to left. So the first thing I'll make you aware of, I guess, as I wander down to the hole here would be if the putt's breaking from right to left here, here's the centre of the cup as we're looking from where the ball is. The ball's going into somewhere on this side of the hole. So it's going to break into the right side of the cup as if you're looking from the view you're at there. Now, that would be the entry point. That can be an area that's definitely worth becoming aware of, because I think seeing where the ball's going to break into the hole and predicting where that point is can actually help you draw the picture back to the golf ball from there and suggest, well, where would the ball need to be at certain points along that putt to go into the hole here. I think it also helps to give you a bit of a cue for speed. The firmer you hit a putt, the straighter it will go into the hole. The softer you hit it, the higher that entry point will become. So just becoming aware of those points can be quite worthwhile. One of the things people will really talk to me about a lot would be an apex. Now, the way to think of the apex would be if we drew a straight line from the golf ball to the middle of the hole, the apex could be considered the highest point the ball gets away from that line. So if we had a rainbow-shaped curve here, it would be that point that's the highest point away from the straight line to the hole where the ball's going to be. So that's the apex of the putt. Now, that's quite often a thing people will mention to me, and I think one of the big errors I see there, if I just came halfway down my putt here, so about halfway down my putt would be about here. So because we've assessed that it's a right to left putt, the apex is going to have to go up this way somewhere. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the apex was there. We've now created a scenario where the apex is maybe a foot right of the straight line to the hole. So as a player comes in here now, they've got an awareness of the ball having to travel over this mini ghost hole that I've placed down. Now, one of the most common things I see there will be that players will then set themselves in, they'll aim at that apex. Now, the challenge with that is that it'd be very unlikely that there's zero break in this first half of the putt, but lots of break from the apex onwards. So in reality, if that was the apex, if I've predicted the correct point there, we would actually need to aim right of that, because the ball will break in that first half of the putt. All right, so I think having an understanding that the apex generally isn't where you should be aiming can be crucial as well. And the way I encourage players to go through this kind of exercise here, and it doesn't matter whether you use aim point or whether you just visually read greens with your eyes or a combination of both, I think practicing green reading, marking out some of those points we've just discussed, can be really helpful when it comes to getting on the golf course and creating strong visuals when you go to hit a putt. I'm sure you've all watched the golf on TV when they don't do it so much anymore, but they project the lines on the green of where they're expecting the putt to break. Now, if you could have those projected onto the green for you before every putt you hit during your next medal round, I'm pretty certain you'd hold more putts. If someone gave you the answer, gave you that real strong visual on the ground, well, just roll the ball somewhere near that line and it's going to be in the hole. Can't help but to help you hold more putts. So what we need to do in our practice is try and get good at creating those visuals. So when we get on the golf course, we've got an opportunity to recreate it. So the drill here really would involve using your process as it is, marking out a couple of aspects of the putt, hitting the putt, and then reassessing and changing. And in this kind of exercise, it's absolutely fine to get it wrong. I'm just going to do it live. I've not hit this putt yet. I don't know what the break is. So I'm just going to go through it with my process, which would involve aim point. I'm going to mark out a couple of factors that I think you could be looking at. We'll hit the putt. We'll assess what happened, and then we'll play around with it as we need to, if we need to see what we do differently. So if I'm looking at this putt here from an aim point perspective, I'm going to come halfway down there, less than a 2% slope. So if I was to come in behind the ball there, so I've gone through my process, and what I've identified there is, I think, a point maybe just over a cup outside the right edge of the hole here. Now, that would be my aim point. That's where I'm going to try to start the putt. So the second thing we would then know, going back to the idea of the apex, is the apex must be nearer to the zero than that, must be nearer to the zero line to the hole. So what I'm going to add in, just to give you a good visual there, is a elevated string line. Really useful little tool for this kind of practice, because it gives you just good feedback on what we're doing. So we'll pop that in behind the ball there. We'll bring that down over our golf ball, straight up over our tee peg. So what I've created there is a really strong visual for my aim line. So fundamentally, once I've got the golf ball in under my spot there, that's where my intended start line would be. Now it's interesting, as I stand there already, I'm potentially thinking that that's a bit too low. So thinking back to my aim point process, that would suggest to me that I've either underestimated the amount of side slopes, it's maybe stronger than the 2% I thought it might be, or potentially the green speed might be a little bit quicker than I'm expecting, which will cause the ball to break more, even though the slope value is the same. But for the purpose of what we're doing today, we're going to play it, because ultimately I think it's okay to hit a putt, get it wrong and then readjust. So now thinking about what I've got there, I'm going to pop down my little ghost hole, just over halfway down the putt. And I'm picturing there, let's just check that I'm happy with where I've got that. Yeah, so I'm picturing there that for the very first part of my journey here, the ball's going to stay underneath this string line. It's then going to start to break and be somewhere over this apex point. It's going to follow it into an entry point that, if this was 6 o'clock at the bottom here, it's probably around 4:30 on the clock face. Okay, so we've got the ball in there, so we're going to hit this putt. As I said, the more I stand here now, I'm convinced it probably is low, but let's hit it and see. Right, so we're going to get into our setup, putter in. Right, so I'm going to let my eyes trace down that white line, the string line, over the apex point and towards the centre of the cup there. So we'll come in and we'll hit the putt. Okay, yeah, good. So I think hopefully the video will show that. The ball started really nicely down here, broke beautifully over my apex, was decent for speed, but has missed the whole low. So if I go back through my aim point process there, the first thing I would come in and do would be check the slope halfway down the putt. Probably is more like a 3% slope in aim point terms than a 2%, so I think I've aimed it a bit low. So probably I could just reassess there. I'll roll another ball in. Once we've hit that first putt, the whole point now is just to learn. So it's absolutely fine to get it wrong. We just got to try and appreciate which piece was in the wrong place. So if I critically looked at that putt and said, was my start line okay? I think the answer is yes. If I looked at my speed, I think I'm happy with where the ball's gone for pace. So really it's only my reading process. And again, I've then gone into that a bit further and said to myself, right, I think I've underestimated the slope value here. So if I then come into the putt now, we'll go 3 with game point. So yeah, that adds in a lot more break. Gets me more like somewhere in here, almost double the amount of break there, which all of a sudden now you can start to see this apex point. It's definitely too far this way. So I'm going to nudge the apex up to there. I'll just come and check that, get the ball under the line. Just come and check that from behind that I'm happy with it. See, again, this looks a lot more realistic. It obviously helps that I've seen the putt break once, so I've got a strong vision in my mind for the curve. But all of a sudden now I'm thinking, ball can run down the line. 5 o'clock I suggested on the previous ones, it's actually coming in higher. Again, we'll get ourselves set in there. All right, putter in behind the ball, so it's down the string line, over the apex, towards the hole. Let's hit the putt. Right, okay, pushed it. You can see it started right at the line. So I'm not going to be critical on my read on that. I've just hit a bit of a push. No problem at all. We'll bring another ball in. Yeah, again, it's all feedback, isn't it? It's all about learning and understanding what I've done correctly, what I didn't do correctly. Didn't actually feel too bad, that putt, if I'm honest. So what I'm going to do in that scenario, I'm just going to hit it again. Maybe I've overcooked this now a little bit in terms of break. Potentially it's just under a 3, but I don't think we're far off now, this being pretty usable. Again, so it's eyes down the string line, over that ghost hole there, into the cup at 4 o'clock. Yeah, so I've hit a really nice putt there. So I think probably I would reflect on this now. I think this is just somewhere between a 2 and a 3% slope. And fundamentally, I can afford to bring this down a little bit into here. Just nudge my ghost hole a smidge to the side there, and we should be fairly close. All right. So we're going to put our putter in. Again, same process. I just go down that line over the ghost hole into the hole at the end there. Yeah, and all of a sudden I can be pretty comfortable with that. I can see I've started it quite nicely on line. I can see it's run down that line there quite nicely. We'll just hit one more, again down the line, ghost hole, hole at the end. Yeah, a little bit under speed there, which is why it's broken too much, but again, I'm okay with that. And as I said, it's absolutely fine to get things wrong. But the key point I think to take from this exercise is, like, when you practice your green reading, try and isolate the factors so you can actually have an awareness of, did I read the putt properly? Did I push or pull the putt? Have I got my pace wrong? And you'll see I've done a combination of all three there. It's absolutely fine to get it wrong. It can in some ways be helpful because it might start to show you patterns that actually, yeah, my speed is always too low. Or I do actually maybe suffer with more of a push or a pull or whatever it might be. And having that awareness is great to take feedback to take to your coach or to go and work on the practice screen, because it allows you to manage it. If you don't know there's a problem, you've got no way of fixing it. But the things to think about there would be that the factors we've discussed, you've got your straight line, that's where we're going to aim. You've got your apex here, which is generally never somewhere you should be aiming because the ball's going to break onto that. And then you've got your entry point. And I think if you can start to link those bits back together, you might find some of those resonate more than others with you. So you may feel more comfortable just looking at the aim line, or being aware of where the apex is and trying to start the ball higher to roll it over, or looking at the entry point, or a combination of all three. There's no right answers with this. Golf's not a one-size-fits-all game. But I think having some structure to your practice where you deliberately try and practice green reading is crucial, because, again, in my experience, too many players are too vague with what they do. They don't really have a process to go through. They'll hit putts and kind of not quite know why it's missed. So once I've gone through that process here on one part, I might just move myself to a different part of the green. You know, now that I've got that picture in my mind, see if I can learn from that. Okay, I underappreciated the slope in aim point terms last time, so let's try and be aware of that, and I might do some deliberate practice on that as a standalone aspect. But as I said, having some structure to your green reading practice is really important, because it allows you to actually isolate the factors you're good at and not, and then you can consider your process as a whole and which bits work and which bits you should steer yourself back towards when you're on the golf course. So give that a try. Like I said, deliberate practice of green reading, massively underrated. Definitely feels like an area where you can gain, because I don't think people generally are doing enough of it. And just starting to do that should hopefully give you some nice visual cues. So when you get to the golf course, you can look at a putt and you can be pretty certain you're looking at the right things that give you the best opportunities to roll all down that line and into the hole.